What if the first thing watching you was never the world, but your awakening? Not a presence outside you, a memory inside you, trying to surface. Most people ignore that first flicker, the shift in the air before thought forms, the pressure behind the eyes when something unseen begins paying attention back. They call it stress, tiredness, coincidence. The ancients had a harsher word for it, the veil. And here's the part no one told you. The veil doesn't hide the world from you. It hides you from the world. In his final hours, Jesus didn't describe the veil as something sacred. He described it like a structure, a doorway disguised as silence, not faith. Recognition, a key turning where no one can hear. Picture the garden, moonlight trembling on olive leaves, shadows moving where soldiers shouldn't be. Before chains touched his wrists, he leaned toward the ones who could truly hear and whispered that the rulers of this world survive only by keeping humanity asleep, through routines, urgencies, and small borrowed truths that feel like your own thoughts. You've lived inside that architecture your entire life. You wake tired though you slept. You pray for peace and feel watched in your own room. And maybe it's because you are. But the trap breaks in the same place it begins. Not in belief, but in the moment awareness remembers its origin, the quiet click when the soul calls itself by its true name. Tonight, we're not chasing myth. We're tracing a living current, buried inside two ancient words, kept only for those who could remember. If you speak them tonight, what could possibly keep you in the loop tomorrow? In the next part, I'll show you the machine you never noticed. Not through miracles, but through the habits you've mistaken for choice. You wake up before the alarm even finishes. The blue light greets you like an old friend. Messages flash. News scrolls. 100 tiny demands rush in before your feet touch the ground. You tell yourself it's just another morning, but somewhere behind your eyes, a pressure hums. A static that doesn't belong to the sound of waking life. That hum is the system calling your name. It doesn't come with chains or threats. It comes disguised as routine. That's how it wins. The Archons learned long ago that control doesn't need violence when it has attention. Every ping, every must-see headline, every subtle pull toward urgency feeds the same machine the Gnostics warned about. A counterfeit current that loops divine consciousness through repetition until it forgets it's divine. They don't steal your freedom, they distract it. Yet some of you have begun to sense the gap between moments, the tiny pause where time stops breathing. You feel it in the elevator when everything suddenly goes quiet, in the shower when your thoughts fall away, in the half-second before you reply to a message. That's not emptiness. That's the crack in the architecture. If you've ever felt that silence, even once, you're not here by accident. You are one of the few who know how to pause. And that pause is not passive, it's a weapon. See the hook, don't bite. Jesus called it the doorway within. The kingdom, he said, is inside you. Not above the clouds, not in temples built by human hands, but hidden in the quiet the world taught you to fear. The early mystics left a code for those who could hear. When the inner voice grows louder than the outer world, closed doors open by themselves. So test it. In your next scroll, your next flare of irritation, your next urgent reply, do nothing for 3 breaths. 3 breaths, that's all. Watch how the hook dissolves when you stop reacting and simply witness. If this lands, type one word below. Aware. It teaches the algorithm where the awakened gather. The moment you do, the machine stutters, the leak in your energy seals, and the truth inverts. You were never trapped inside the system. The system was built inside you. You choose the signal. And in that silence, it isn't a mirror that forms. It's a page. A contract you never meant to sign. Across it, faint imprints of every I am you've ever finished on autopilot, waiting to be reclaimed. Imagine standing before a mirror that doesn't reflect your face but your beliefs. Every fear, every judgment, every self-doubt stares back as form and shadow. Most people glance once and turn away. They call it personality, destiny, karma. But those who linger notice something else, a faint movement, a shimmer deep within the glass, as if the reflection itself is studying them. That presence has a name older than language, the archonic mind. It doesn't shout, it suggests. It doesn't command, it convinces. It feeds not on your body, but on your agreement. In the ancient texts buried for centuries at Nag Hammadi, the Gnostic teachers described these rulers not as thunderous gods, but as subtle persuaders. They never needed to strike humanity with lightning, only to make us sign our names beneath the wrong sentences that begin with "I am." One false identification at a time, the divine forgets its own handwriting. And when those buried scrolls were unearthed in 1945, hidden among desert sands and clay jars cracked by time, people expected thunder, revelation, divine spectacle. What they found instead were quiet words about consent. No thunder, no wrath. Just a reminder that enslavement required only your agreement. No whip needed, only a pen that finishes the Archons' sentences for them. Each, "I am not enough." Each, "I am too late." Another invisible signature on their document of illusion. The trap didn't begin in violence. It began in vocabulary. This is how the false light sells itself as guidance, how Christ consciousness is traded for compliance. One mislabeled "I am" at a time. Jesus understood this game. "The ruler of this world has no hold on me," he said, not as defiance, but as diagnosis. He had revoked consent. The illusion depends entirely on participation. It thrives when you identify with what it projects. Each "I am afraid," "I am unworthy," "I am broken" tightens the net. Every "I am light," "I am aware," "I am," without attachment, tears it open. This isn't myth, it's architecture. Reality arranges itself around your words, the way iron aligns to a magnet. Change the phrase, change the field, change the word, watch the world reassemble. The Archons know this. That's why they work through language, through labels that make you forget that language itself was born from silence. And when you finally stop repeating their grammar, the mask stops reflecting. What gazes back isn't a savior. It's the unfiltered consciousness you buried beneath all the borrowed names. Vast, luminous, unafraid. That is where freedom begins. Not in escape, but in reclaiming the authorship of "I am." Soon you'll see why they built such convincing counterfeits of light, and why their glow feels so much like your own thoughts. Every lie needs a seed of truth to survive. The Archons learned this long before scripture took form. They wove small threads of divinity into the fabric of illusion, so that when you touched it, it would feel familiar, almost holy. That's why the trap feels like home. It borrows your own light and sells it back to you as comfort. When you chase validation, when you measure worth by reflection instead of radiance, you end up worshiping the imitation of yourself they built. But awareness reverses the current. Once you recognize the imitation, it begins to starve. That's why Jesus spoke in riddles that overturn logic. The last shall be first, the meek shall inherit the earth. Those weren't moral slogans, they were escape codes. The counterfeit world speaks in linear logic. Paradox scrambles its signal. Freedom doesn't start by doing. It begins when you unlearn the reflex to obey illusion. If you can pause for 10 breaths, you're not prey. You're the signal. Picture your mind as a soundboard, not a sky, a panel of sliders labeled with old beliefs. The Archons keep nudging the same controls until the mix feels normal. But when you stop reaching for the sliders, something else happens. The whole room begins to resonate. Not a new song, just the silence beneath the noise, finally audible. And when the storm inside starts to rise, when anxiety hums beneath your ribs, don't rush to quiet it. Instead, place one fingertip against the center of your chest. Hold it there for 10 slow seconds. Feel the weight, the warmth, the rhythm beneath. Then whisper within. Who is aware of this feeling? Don't answer. Just notice the space that question creates. That space is untouched. It's not emotion, it's recognition. And if your mind begins to spin again, let your eyes rest on something still. A line on the table, the edge of a doorway, and keep them there for 10 slow breaths. While your gaze remains unmoving, your awareness will remember who is looking. You don't need to win against thought. Just stop running after it. The nervous system listens to stillness. The body remembers before the mind does. The Gospel of Thomas hinted at this moment. When the seeker finds the one who sees, the seen can no longer control the seer. In that single recognition, the architecture of control begins to crumble. Because the prison was never made of bars, it was made of belief. There's a reason awakening feels like loss before it feels like freedom. The moment you begin to see through the veil, the world you once trusted starts to dissolve. Friends drift. Ambitions fade. The things that once fueled you begin to ring hollow. That emptiness isn't failure. It's the clearing before remembrance. The Archons programmed humanity to fear that clearing, to drown every silence with noise, every question with borrowed certainty. But the void is sacred ground. It's where false identities die and true sight begins. Jesus didn't call it void. He called it the wilderness. 40 days alone. No voices, no proof, no comfort. That silence wasn't punishment. It was purification. The same is true for you. When life grows quieter than usual, when the world stops responding the way it used to, you're not being abandoned, you're being invited. If the silence around you has been growing louder lately, that's not emptiness. It's the laboratory of transformation, a space few souls have the courage to enter. Call loneliness by a different name, the laboratory. When you rename it, you rewrite the outcome. No one is judging here. Only you, your breath, and the quiet that has waited since the beginning. Because the Archons cannot follow you into stillness. Their entire empire depends on movement, reaction, distraction, endless doing. Stillness is their exile. The moment you stop running, they vanish. And within that stillness, something ancient begins to breathe again. The current of source, the memory of what you were before language divided you. The mystics of old said, the soul remembers itself by forgetting the world. That's not rejection. It's realignment. You begin to see that nothing ever happened to you. It was always happening through you. Even pain reveals itself as a mirror, showing how easily light can forget its light. When that understanding dawns, the wound becomes a doorway. The silence becomes a teacher. You realize what Jesus meant when he said, "If you lose your life, you will find it." He wasn't speaking of death. He was describing the return. And when you've stood still long enough, the machinery of illusion begins to expose its wires. Once those wires are finally visible, they don't collapse. They shift, not outwardly, but inwardly. And that shift is where the real transformation begins. When awakening reaches its midpoint, the shift doesn't feel like clarity at first. It feels like dissonance. Not the loud kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that makes familiar places feel slightly too small, and familiar thoughts feel strangely borrowed. This isn't collapse. It's reconfiguration. A rearranging of the inner architecture as your awareness begins expanding faster than your old identity can track. This is the stage the mystics called the stretching of the vessel. You're not breaking, you're widening. The patterns that once controlled you don't vanish. They lose their camouflage. A fear rises, and instead of gripping you, it stands there exposed, unable to pretend it's your voice anymore. A memory surfaces, and for the first time you can see the lesson inside it instead of the weight. The Archons don't attack here, they retreat. Not because you fought them, but because your field is changing shape. You can't be harvested the same way once you stop collapsing into every thought that passes through you. And this is where a new current enters, one that doesn't come from emotion or logic, but from direction. You feel pulled towards certain conversations without knowing why. You feel repelled by certain environments even when they seem harmless. You make choices that don't make sense on paper but feel unmistakably right in the chest. This isn't intuition, it's alignment. Awareness begins moving you before thought can catch up. If you've ever had a week where everything felt like it was rearranging itself around you, people leaving, opportunities shifting, things breaking only to clear space, that wasn't chaos. That was calibration. Consciousness making room for the version of you that finally woke up. And once this stage stabilizes, something extraordinary happens. Your inner signal becomes stronger than the outer noise. You stop chasing signs because you've become one. You stop fearing interference because your field has risen beyond reach. You stop asking for clarity because clarity starts appearing unprovoked. This is the quiet turning point of awakening. Not dramatic, not cinematic, but unmistakably sovereign. From here on, your life no longer moves around you, it moves with you. There comes a moment when remembrance becomes fire, not warmth, but ignition. It begins the instant you stop searching for light as something distant and realize it's been burning behind your eyes all along. The Archons can imitate love, power, even holiness, but they cannot counterfeit that flame. It is self-existing, self-knowing. It doesn't demand attention, it radiates by nature. And when that flame awakens, the false world begins to flicker. You'll feel it first as a weight rising from the chest, then as clarity slicing through every story ever written about you. The veil trembles because you've remembered the one thing it cannot contain, your origin. Before the world was, I am. That was never a boast, it was a map. These two words are not language, they are resonance, the name of being, recognizing itself. Spoken with awareness, they rewrite the architecture of perception. The parasite loses its host because the host stops identifying as food. Say it quietly, I am. No decoration, no need. Let it vibrate through your bones, like an ancient chord returning home. The Gnostics called it the thunder that unmade the heavens. When consciousness speaks its own name, creation reorders itself around that sound. You don't have to believe. You only have to remember, because you were never a fragment begging for light. You were the source fractaled into form. The trap cannot survive that recognition. When knowledge calls itself by its true name, darkness runs out of things to do. And in that hush, nothing disappears. Everything simply kneels. So tonight, when silence gathers and old fears come to test you, let them. Answer not with resistance or prayer, but with presence. I am. That's enough. In that instant, every illusion bows, the machinery halts, the infinite stands revealed as you. When that frequency steadies, stop searching for proof. Let proof find you. And as we move to the closing, we'll seal this flame with a simple ritual so that when dawn comes, you still burn at the same frequency of remembrance. When the final veil falls, the world doesn't vanish. It remains, but its hold dissolves. The noise still hums, faces still pass, yet beneath it all, the current has changed. You move through life like light through water, untouched, uncontained. That is freedom, not escape, but remembrance. The Archons will still whisper, as they always do, but once you've tasted silence, their voices lose flavor. They sound mechanical, hollow, unreal. You no longer react, you witness. You no longer seek, you recognize. This is the consciousness Jesus guarded for those who could bear it. He never promised comfort, he promised clarity, and clarity burns away illusion. So tonight, before you sleep, dim the lights. Feel your breath move in and out, and let every name the world gave you fade. Don't chase peace. Don't demand proof. Just wait. When the quiet begins to widen, speak the words, not to the air, not to a God above, but to the vast awareness pulsing through your own heartbeat. I am. Again, slower this time. I am. Once more, until it no longer feels spoken, but remembered. These are not affirmations. They are the oldest truth returning to sound. Every chosen one through history has known this moment. The fishermen in Galilee, the monks in the desert, the seekers listening now. The same current. The same recognition. You are not lost in the maze. You are the light revealing it. And as you rise into tomorrow, let these words be your armor. I am the flame the darkness cannot name. I am the stillness the noise cannot reach. I am the memory that ends the dream. I am, I am, I am. If you want a place free from noise to practice this remembrance together, there's an inner chamber linked in the description. There, you'll find a weekly rhythm of silence, guidance, and shared awakening. The practices inside the inner chamber deepen the Gnostic teachings, unravel the false light and the reincarnation trap, and bring you back to the frequency of Christ consciousness. Like if the flame rose. Subscribe to stay in the current. Comment I am to mark the night your frequency changed, and share with one soul who needs it now. The Archons are still watching, but they can no longer touch you. You've remembered what they fear most. You are awake.